All right, so I want to thank everyone for being here today to our FASD Champions Connect International FASD Awareness Day speaker. And today our guest speaker is Laurie Hume, and she is going to be providing us with some insights on the perspective of birth parents and what they would like midwives and nurses and nurse practitioners to know. And this is presented by MPs, midwives and nurses partnering to prevent FASDs, which is a member of the Cooperative for Alcohol-Free Pregnancy. And as an acknowledgement, we want to acknowledge that we are gathering today on the ancestral and traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascan people. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize their contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina. We also acknowledge that the University of Alaska Anchorage and the institutions and other institutions were founded in the aftermath of influences that led to the exclusion and erasure of many Indigenous peoples, including those on whose land we live and work. This acknowledgement is one step in the continuing process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism, including the racial, cultural, and political accusations and judgments of risk and blame associated with alcohol use and the role it plays in shaping and reinforcing stigma and stereotypes in our communities. And one final disclaimer, this project is supported by the US Department of Health and Human Services, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the contents of this presentation are solely the responsibility of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official views of the CDC, the US Department of Health and Human Services, or the University of Alaska Anchorage Institute for Social and Economic Research. All right, and with that, I'm going to stop the share and introduce our wonderful speaker today, Laurie Hume. Laurie is the birth mother of an almost 13-year-old child living with an FASD here in Anchorage, Alaska. She is a 6th grader or 7th grader now?
7th grader.
7th grader, yeah. And she loves ballet and jazz, dancing, and wants to be a pop star, a teacher, or a marine biologist one day. She enjoys spending time with her pet cat, Miss Kitty, her friends, and dancing. Laurie works in the finance department of a tribal nonprofit here in Anchorage, giving back to the community and helping people realize their potential. She recently received her MBA in healthcare administration, and this undertaking was motivated by her frustration with navigating a complex healthcare system in search of quality support for her daughter. Laurie has been recognized by the American Bar Association as a family reunification hero and volunteers her time with the Alaska Therapeutic Court System as a peer advocate and mentor. She is also involved with the Alaska Center for FASD, and her goal is to share her experience, her strength, and hope to reduce stigma associated with birth mothers and individuals living with FASD. So welcome, Laurie. We are honored to have you here today. Very keen to hear your perspective and advice. And just to let folks know what the format will be here today, we are going to do sort of a Q&A format. We have shared some questions with Laurie, and so we will just go ahead and start, and then if there's some time at the end, then we will open up to questions from the folks attending. Welcome, Laurie.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be able to speak with this group and share my experience in hopes of reducing stigma and just giving a different perspective.
Yeah. So our first question, what do birth parents want nurse practitioners, midwives, and nurses to know about FASDs?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is to recognize that every mother, every parent is an individual, and every person has their own story. And while I guess it really depends on what that individual's perspective is on alcohol and pregnancy as to, leads to part of their story. Some women don't know the harm associated with alcohol and pregnancy. They're just not informed of that. Many women don't know that they're pregnant. And when they find out, they can stop. And then there are women who don't know how to stop drinking. So I think that perspective has to be understood by the nurse or the midwife or practitioner in general. Like, where is your patient, client? What perspective are they taking? And then being able to adjust to that and try to come from a place of understanding. My case was, and not every birth parent is an alcoholic or has substance abuse issues. That does happen to be part of my story. I guess I kind of have a complicated story. I knew the harm associated with alcohol use and pregnancy. I did not know I was pregnant until 12 weeks into my pregnancy. I wasn't planning on having children. I also was able to stop, but that was probably only because I had had years of substance abuse therapy in the past. That didn't take all the way, but at least I had that understanding and that knowledge. So yeah, like I think above everything else, just trying to understand the woman's individual story and where they're coming from so that you can best help them.
And what can nurse practitioners, midwives, and nurses do to raise awareness about FASDs among their colleagues, among their clients? What advice would you have there?
And in my experience through this process, there wasn't a lot of like FASDs weren't talked about much during my pregnancy. I had stopped drinking. There was really nothing. There was no sense, no good to put any energy towards lamenting over what I could not change. So we focused on what we could do to have the healthiest pregnancy possible, which I think was a good strategy for me. I always had that worry. Through my whole entire pregnancy, I had the worry because I had known how I drank. But just the education piece and making it a normal part of any health screening, talking about how much alcohol normalizing that conversation so that it doesn't feel like it judging somebody. Because in my case, when people asked me how much I drank, I got very defensive. So being able to be keen to those kind of clues, like picking up on defensive-ness, and then maybe there's just a lot of flexibility and adjustment, I think, when you're talking with somebody, particular if they think that they might have a substance abuse issue or are defensive about how much they drink, or carry a little bit of shame around that. You would take that differently, have different tactics than if you were to speak with somebody who did not have any beliefs that maybe alcohol or drugs were a problem in their life or causing them problems. So again, it goes back to every woman has an individual story. And I think, and I forgot to mention this, but that no matter what, and what I've learned, and this has changed, this perspective has changed for me, is that no parent aims to harm their child on purpose. Nobody is purposefully doing this to cause harm. It's for those reasons that they didn't know the harm, they didn't know they were pregnant, and they didn't know how to stop. I think that those three categories really summarize it up. So education, understanding, compassion. I think that is going to be the theme too throughout our conversation.
Yeah, that makes sense. How can nurse practitioners, midwives, and nurses help prevent FASDs?
Again, goes back to education, understanding, and compassion when we're talking with others about it. And I think too, as a care provider, letting the parent know, no matter what, it's going to be okay. And that they supporting them, that they will have the support that they need to get through this, that no matter what the outcome, everything's going to be okay. It might not be easy, and there might be difficult days and difficult times, but that in the end, it will be all right. And it's going to be exactly how it's supposed to be. That is my personal belief. And that these challenges grow, help us develop and grow, build character. And what I've experienced is that on the other side of any challenge, there's a gift that you're given that you would not have gotten in any other way but the way it was presented. And that is what helps me be okay with difficult days, knowing my brain automatically goes to, I'm wondering what the lesson will be in this, because it's going to be a good one, especially if it's really challenging. Education and support. That's all we, as human beings, all we want to do is be heard and understood and accepted and know that we're going to be okay.
And how can nurse practitioners, midwives, and nurses talk to their clients about drinking alcohol during pregnancy? What would you recommend?
First, coming from a place without judgment. I'm sure that there's a certain amount of the population that doesn't, that believes that maybe 1 or 2 drinks during pregnancy is okay. And there's a lot there. I hear a lot, well, I drank while I was pregnant, a couple of times, and my child's okay and everything's okay. Yeah, but why would you want to take the chance? Number one. And two, maybe there are some underlying issues that are being diagnosed as something different than what it isn't. That's my experience, is that there's not, because every parent has an individual story, hence every person living with an FASD, every child is going to look different. There's no cookie cutter way to say how an FASD is going to show up in somebody's lives. We just don't know, and just trying to help them come to a decision to not drink on their own so they feel empowered. And they're not being told. I think as people, we want to be empowered and believing that we, getting the education so that we can make the right decision for who we are.
Yeah, so empowerment and partnership.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and compassion.
Absolutely. Yeah, all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And our final question, what questions should nurse practitioners, midwives, and nurses be asking their pregnant clients?
I think that it's important to understand what the woman's understanding is of alcohol and pregnancy, so that they can determine how to approach them to encourage them to not drink alcohol during pregnancy. Again, it all comes, like knowing who your audience is, trying to figure out a little bit more about them and what their beliefs are so that you can best serve them and best help them come to that decision on that empowering decision on their own. And again, with no judgment and building trust, that's super important, so that somebody feels okay to be vulnerable and that it's not going to be held against them, or they're not going to be judged, or that some, social services agency isn't going to come knocking on their door because of any reports, or, that's a scary thing. And safety, making the parent, the woman, feel safe. No matter what, we all want to feel safe.
Right. You can't feel empowered or in partnership with someone if you don't have that baseline of safety.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I will say that I had to be completely honest with my providers, because I was so scared. I needed to tell somebody else, like, hey, I think I might be pregnant and I drink a lot. And I think in becoming a parent, becoming a mom, knowing that there is this other living being inside of me, while my well-being was important, I also had somebody else that I had to consider. And frankly, whatever anybody thinks about me as a parent, my goal is to make sure that my daughter gets the support that she needs and doesn't have any more difficulties than she's already got. Oh.
Yeah, thank you. Well, like I said, that was our last question. I do want to open it up to the folks who are attending today, and if they have any questions for Laurie. We've got maybe, we'll say 5 more minutes to chat, and yeah, open it up.
Quick question. Hi, my name is Lily.
Hi.
I'm a nurse midwife and want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I have a question regarding how can midwives, nurse practitioners, and nurses support parents of children with FASDs?
See, I know a lot about that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your experience.
It's been frustrating because there's so little known about how FASDs show up because the spectrum is so broad. My first advice is to please listen to the parents. They know what they're seeing. Part of my experience is that I had a difficult time getting my daughter diagnosed. And it's because I couldn't I was actually discouraged from getting a diagnosis, which it took me about a year to finally get somebody to say, okay, we hear you. We want to test your child. She did all of the I think up till 2 years, we did the screenings and they said, we don't see any evidence. So if anything is going to show up, it's going to show up at school time when she started at school age. So within the first week of school, I was getting emails and calls from the teacher. So it showed up. And yet it still took me another year to get my daughter a diagnosis. And I still am challenged by her providers to this day that I just had a conversation with one of them. We have a new provider. And I said, I really need you to hear me, that I think sometimes that they're, from my experience, that the providers are easily want to dismiss the alcohol component as to what this behavior is or why things are the way they are. And my point is that I've been vulnerable and honest with you. I need you to hear me, that I don't think that it's got to do with some of these other things, or my parenting, or the way it has to do with these brain-based differences that my daughter has. And even though she does not look like she has a disability, or that she has FASD, because she doesn't have the facial characteristics or the really pronounced facial characteristics. If you spent any time in our home, you would see that she does have challenges with overstimulation, with textures of foods, with textures of clothing, and she has a very extreme response to it. And to get just, bits and pieces of it, she can hold it together during a therapy session just fine. It's, when she comes home from a full day at school, she's held it together all day long, just in this effort to be normal. And we get these explosions. Like at our house, we let her explode for half an hour. Like, you come home from school, do whatever you want. Nobody will take it personally. Whatever you need to say, whatever, if you need to scream. But and I've had people say, I can't believe your daughter talks to you that way. It's just being more understanding, and really understanding that the parents can provide valuable information. That is something that's been frustrating for me. The most frustrating part of living with FASDs has been in the getting practitioners to hear me, getting her pediatrician, who's known her since birth and knows my story and through pregnancy, to say, I think you should have her tested. I think that he should have been the one that advocated for me to have her tested. And while I love her pediatrician, I disagree with him on that fact, that could be something that we should have looked at sooner. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. It's very helpful.
Okay.
And you're highlighting how you needed to initiate this testing.
I did.
When you're kind of highlighting that there's probably a lot of people being missed.
I think that there are a lot of people being missed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
And that adds to the stigma, because nobody wants to talk about it. People want to talk about autism and all of these other different mental health disorders, but nobody wants to talk about FASDs. And it's I've been in conferences before where with foster parents, because many children are in foster care, and being a birth parent, I've had people not want to sit next to me after they've found out, that have gotten up and moved or have looked at me differently. And I'm still that same person we were having this great conversation 20 minutes ago. I'm still that person. I'm not a monster. I didn't do this on purpose. Nobody wants to harm their child. I know that. I had ideas about that before that it became my experience, that, that's selfish. How could you do that? Some people can't stop. Some people don't know. There's a range of reasons why it happens.
Marilyn, did you have a question?
I think that Lily phrased it nicely and Laurie responded beautifully. Laurie, you're an inspiration to me in terms of how you've walked in your recovery journey and what you've done in terms of advocacy for your daughter. And
Thank you.
The key thing that I'm hearing you saying is listen to women, which is one of the mottos of the American College of Nurse Midwives and nurses in general is we are known for doing that. And I think sometimes systems get in our way in that we're pressed and pushed into appointments that are too short and don't allow for us to do what I know we do well. And you are a living example of somebody who took some action in response to that by going to get an MBA in health policy. It's like, you want to change the world, girl.
Well, that's, I laughed because I said I wanted initials after my name, and MOM wasn't getting it. So I thought if I got MBA after my name, that people might listen.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think the power of story to start breaking down stigma is huge. And
Yes.
having people like you who have the courage to share and to help us as providers know what we need to do differently is so incredibly powerful.
And
Thank
I
you.
need to thank you also, Marilyn, because you have also helped me grow in being okay with, I have grown in the years since getting the diagnosis, the formal diagnosis, and being okay with saying it and not feeling shame around it. Because
Right.
once, as long as you're feeling shame, it's hard to have a voice. And through this whole process, I've just been able to reduce that shame feeling in myself and be a better advocate and be okay with, yes, I'm a birth parent of somebody who has an FASD, and maybe make it okay for somebody else to be okay with getting their child tested.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Laurie. Really, really appreciate your time today and your advice, your recommendations, your insights. Been really great. So thank you very much for taking time out of your day to share with us.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate that. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
All right. All right, well, that is our FASD Champions Connect for today. And thanks everybody for attending.
Bye, everybody.